Welcome back to Rotten and Forgotten. Tonight, we're gonna buckle down and finish up this China bike. I ordered some parts after last episode and they finally showed up. Not just any parts either, 15 pounds of China parts, and I'm hoping this is gonna get this bike back together and almost brand new, sorta, and we'll get her out the door so we can start bringing in other projects. So yeah, let's buckle down and get this China bike done, I suppose. Let's open up this box too and see what kind of goodies we got. So, what's inside the China box, you might be asking yourself? Well, a set of forks for one. We got ourselves a fresh air filter. Yup, I'm gonna try not to break this one because it's new and nice. And we got ourselves a tube for the tire. And that's about it. So starting off, we're gonna try to get these forks on, and to install the forks, we have to take our handlebars back off. We gotta take our nuts off the top plate, and we gotta take our fender off and all the plastic stuff and the brake and the tire, and basically disassemble the entire front end. So we're gonna throw the bike up on a block, and then we're gonna start taking bolts out until everything falls apart, and then we're gonna reassemble it with our new piece. Now, the reason why we're replacing the forks is because they're not doing so good. We got about a 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch play, and they don't, forkalize at all. There's no suspension. It's like riding a cinder block, so we're gonna fix that up, maybe add some safety onto the machine. So to get the fork assembly off, I'm gonna remove the brake line first, and that's actually mounted onto the fork. Then I suppose we're gonna remove the tire and try to get these plastics off, and then we're gonna come up here and take the handlebars off the forks themselves and then unbolt the fork plate and get them to come off. So then we're, dismounted, I guess. I think if I just push this arm up, yeah, I can unscrew the brake. That's neat. I'm gonna take a picture where that brake was set on the front so I kind of get a rough idea when I put it all back together. Something like that. Yep. We're cruising now. Just a little bit more to go. Come on, over here. Put this back on. There we go. That's disconnected. That comes through here. We got our brake disconnected. Now I gotta get these plastics off, and they look a little rusty, so I'm gonna use an impact with a number 5 hex to try to break them free. A lot of times if you try using a hand ratchet on something like this, you'll just snap the bolt because you ain't got that ooga doogas smashing it, freeing it up. If you are gonna use a hand ratchet on something rusty like this, you can hit it with a hammer, and that kind of does the same thing, but these impacts are kind of a miracle tool. I mean, they're definitely worth their weight. And that wasn't stuck at all, so that was really unnecessary. Yeah, you definitely could have hand ratcheted them. Oh boy. Front wheel is removed. Suppose we can check out the brakes. There's a little bit left there, but there sure ain't much. But we're gonna pretend that they're perfect, so that's good. Fenders removed. Put those with it, I suppose. Now we gotta get our nice handlebar assembly off. There we go. That's disconnected. We got our old forks pulled out. That one fork has a bend in it, so it's definitely time to be replaced. Now, inside here, we got a bearing on the top, and we got a bearing on the bottom of the steering fork shaft holder thing. And then there's this nut that goes on with a cover, and then a nut on top of that, and you kind of saw how I took it apart. There's really not that much to it, but we are gonna lube these bearings up with some wheel bearing grease while we have all this apart, because there's a good chance it's never gonna come apart again. and it's about time we put some fresh grease on there. So we're gonna carefully pack all this and get our fingers nice and greasy because I don't have any gloves. Ooh. Well, now that I got those old bearings all greased up, I dug through my box a little more and I found a new set of bearings for the steering assembly. So yeah, don't be like me. Look through your box a little closer and put new parts in maybe. But I got this penny here and I'm gonna flip it, and heads we'll put in the new bearings. Tails, we're gonna pretend that everything's perfect. And it's heads. We're putting new bearings in. Sure. Fair enough, fate decided. And this thing is stuck now because the guy tightened it. Cool. Where's my wrench? Let's pound these seals out. I need to go find a punch. We gotta whack these races out now. That's a good way to do it, I guess. The old races came out quite well, so that was good. We're gonna get these new ones installed. And to do that, I'm gonna be using a backward socket on an extension, and I'm gonna get started nice and straight and just tap it into place. Now these were sitting flush with the bracket here, so I know where they gotta go. And there we go, nice and flush and ready to go. One thing to note when installing your race, make sure the dish side is down so the bearings seat up into it. Don't put it in backwards, otherwise it's not gonna do what it's supposed to. Just keep an eye on that. It's real easy to do. Then you'll be pounding it back out, and if you don't wreck it, you can retry, or if you do, you'll be ordering new parts. Ouch! So apparently there's different size races for the bottom and the top and bearings, so I got really lucky. I put the right race in the right place and it's gonna work. So that's fortunate. You know, a guy gets lucky every once in a while, I guess. So that's good. Put that there. Is there anyone? Just like that. Put down forks on now. Now with this new set of forks, there's two different mounting holes, so I'll have to eye that up. Is that even in the right spot? This is our old plate here. This is our new plate, and as you can tell, when we line up our old plate on top of the new plate, you can't see through the mounting brackets for the handlebars. Because the new style has like a double normal clutch thing where it clamps onto them, and these are the old style. And yeah, we need to make this into the old style so it works on our bike. So I'm gonna clamp this together, drill 2 holes, and life will be swell. Just like that, we got ourselves a factory pre-drilled mount. One thing to note before you put your plate on the forks is you better make sure you get your throttle and the kill switch back into the fork hole. Otherwise, you're gonna be pretty sad when you have to take it all back apart to get that stuff routed. I've done that before, so just a FYI. Of course, there's trouble in paradise. Our China forks aren't exactly perfect for our fitment. And you know, the fork plate's supposed to fit over here, and then it's supposed to rest on this jam nut. Well, this jam nut's about 1/4 inch underneath, and I know I didn't over tighten the bearings, and I know that they were seated in the same spot, so I think we have a different length fork by about 1/4 inch, which really ain't that big of a deal. It's not gonna make any difference. We just have to add this little washer in there. So yeah, technically not OEM, but I think it's gonna be fine. This washer fits pretty darn good on there. It's not gonna be riding around on the threads, so it should be all right. I'm gonna bolt this plate on here, bolt the handlebars back on, and get this show on the road. Guess who forgot to put the controls through, like the throttle cable and the kill switch? Yep, I did. Even though I told myself I wasn't going to do it, I still did. Pretty smooth. There we go. We got the handlebars reinstalled and the forks are new, so they should be good. Throw our fender back on, we're gonna throw the wheel back on and the plastic pieces and the brakes, and then dive into the back end of the bike and get that figured out too. We're cruising right along though. It's not going too bad. Could always go worse. Just remember that. So when you're reinstalling your front tire, you want to make sure that little peg goes into the brake shoe slot, because that's going to make sure that doesn't slide, so you actually have brakes, basically, if you line that up right, which I didn't have lined up right, but now I do. That's tight. That's also not tight anymore. Could always go worse. Just remember that. Everything was going so well, I decided to break a bolt off, mounting the little plastic thingies, because I had one too many ooga-doogas with the electric machine. So yeah, let's try to drill this bolt out and use an easy tap and take it back out to where it shouldn't be. You're only one bolt away from a bad day in the shop, and this one definitely could have been avoided, but I broke it, so now we have to fix it. I'm drilling out that bolt to get the easy out to fit. Once I got the easy out in there, it still didn't want to come out, so I ended up drilling it to a 1/4 inch hole and tapped it and put a standard bolt in there. Hopefully, you guys don't bust your bolts off when you work on things, but if you do, just remember you can always re-tap it. It's not that big of a deal. It really slows down progress though, and you feel kind of silly after you break it off, but it happens. That's life in a shop. You get used to it. Now that we got the front buttoned up, we're gonna peel this back tire off and put a tube in it. So it's basically the same operation as the front, other than we have a chain to deal with. We got some tensioners to loosen up. Got to pull this main bolt out and try to keep everything pushed together. There's also a disc brake on the right-hand side, or a drum, I should say. So there's a lot going on back here, but it's pretty simple at the end of the day. Ooh, just like that. So we have to try to get this little tire off the rim. To do that, use a little bit of slime. That worked way better than expected. I was able to use this center hub kind of like a tire machine and go around and get that bead to pop off. But now I got to try to get the tube out, and then I got to put the new tube in and make that line up right. So, yeah. These little tires are never fun because you just ain't got enough room to get your finger stuck in there. And there you go. There's our old tube. Valve stem is deleted on it, so that's why it wouldn't hold air. I don't know how well you guys can see it, but there's a rubber ring that runs inside of the rim, and you want to make sure that's in good condition because that's going to keep the spokes covered up. This one is. It's still in good condition. It's not all wore out, and the spokes aren't poking through, so we're going to use it. A lot of times, if the valve stems come out, you got to turn these rings around to get them to line up with the valve stem hole again. It can be a little bit of a challenge, but this one seems to be sliding pretty easy. I got the valve stem through the rim finally. It took a little bit. I'm going to put a vice grip on there, being careful not to wreck the threads, but making sure I get a good grab on it so I don't lose it when I start fighting the rest of this in. But it's usually the valve stem that gives you the most trouble, and the rest of the tube goes in well enough. A big thing to remember when you're working on tube tires, just don't pinch the tube. If you pinch the tube, you're going to have big issues. So I got a vice grip holding onto the valve stem, and I got another vice grip on the rim, and I'm going to start working this the tire around without pinching the tube, hopefully. Oh, ouch! My bar slipped. That was a big light. That was a big light. It came off. Oops, there. We got her in. Now the moment of truth is to go grab an air chuck and try airing it up. I don't hear any obvious leaks, so I think we might have did it, but I'm not going to hold my breath until it holds there for a day or two. I think we're going to call it good. We're going to throw this tire on the bike and put it back together, and a couple more pieces, and it should be almost new. Whoo! There we go. The bike is kind of back together. That's pretty neat. All that's really left is this fresh China filter. Throw on there. The finishing touch, a breather for the gas tank. So now we're not going to splash gas everywhere, hopefully. That didn't go too bad, I guess. You know, there's a lot of parts to throw in there, and we were bouncing back and forth. And hopefully, if you guys learned anything, take your time, try to remember how it goes, and try to do it right-ish. But at the end of the day, as long as it runs and drives, that's all that really matters. I suppose we better make sure this thing still runs. I did learn something too after last video. The gear shift pattern's backwards than when I thought it was. So when I thought I was in neutral, I was actually in fourth, which is the highest gear. So that's pretty interesting. But we'll give her a little bit of full choke and a whoa. Oh, come on now, you sow. Okay, be that way. The shift pattern on this bike is pretty goofy. You gotta shift up to go down, and you gotta shift down to go up, and it's just reverse of everything I've ever had. So other than that, it seems to run all right. It's got way too much power for the size of the bike, but I don't know, I think it's fixed, sorta. I'm getting a little dizzy there, but you know, other than missing the front brake, which the piece that I ordered didn't fit, so that's my own fault, this bike's pretty much together, and it runs pretty darn good, especially considering it's been sitting for the better part of 3 years, and it came from China originally, but I can't complain. You know, it's not quite ergonomic for a bigger fella, but for the children, I think it might fit quite well. But anyways, thank you guys for watching Rotten and Forgotten. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I sure did. I'm glad this bike is done. There'll be snowmobiles coming in the shop pretty darn soon, so stay tuned. We'll catch you later. I might have to drive this thing home. Whew. There goes the clutch. See you later.